Coming up on today's show, is Emil Hemming just a scorer or is there more to his game? We'll talk about that and a lot more in today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalikesh, Director of North American Scouting for Dobber Prospects, joined by my co-host Sebastian High, Director of European Scouting for Dobber Prospects and Head Scout for the team. And today we'll be focusing on Emil Hemming. The prospect spotlight is going to be on him for today's episode. We'll talk about the puck skills first and foremost, the shot, the skating, the stick handling, the passing, all that good stuff. In our second segment, we'll talk more about the in-depth stuff in this game, the toolkit, the habits, the decision-making. And then in our final segment, we'll give our projection of Emil Hemming, what we expect him to be at the NHL level, what his upside is, and which team is going to be the best fit. So make sure to stay tuned until the end to find out which teams we're talking about here as potential options for Emil Hemming. Before we get into any of that, make sure to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Leave us a comment letting us know what you think of Emil Hemming and what you think of your team potentially picking him up. And if you're listening out on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. It's always very much appreciated. So let's get things started right away here with the profile with Emil Hemming. Size, handedness, point production this year, teams he's been playing on. Talk me through it, Sebastian.
All right, so Emil Hemming is a 6'2", 194-pound right shot right winger who is quite young for this draft class. He's a late June 06 birthday, and the production has been interesting this year. So he's played 13 games in the regular season at the U20 level, in which he's scored 11 goals and 18 points, and he's also logged 4 goals and 8 points through 6 U20 playoff games so far. He has, however, spent the majority of the season playing full-time in Liga with TPS, and he's logged 40 games in which he's scored 7 goals and 11 points. So the production may not quite jump off the page at the Liga level, but it should be noted he was playing exclusively bottom 6 minutes and overwhelmingly bottom line minutes in a fourth line checking role. So it certainly limited his ability to showcase his offensive toolkit against professional competition a little bit, but he was still able to chip in with a little bit of production nonetheless.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the interesting part with Hemming is kind of the split that he spent between the J20 League and the U20 in Finland and the Pro League. And, in Liga, there are some better draft eligibles with better production this season. I'm thinking of Konsta Helenius, who has more than twice the amount of points that Emil Hemming has, and almost, I think also twice the amount of points per game that Hemming has. So, there are better
3 or 4 times. Yeah, like it's a pretty big gap.
The production has been ridiculous on Helenius' side, and Hemming just hasn't been able to produce the same. But you look at the minutes he's been playing in Liga, he's been playing between 10 and 12 minutes on a fourth line. He's not playing in a bona fide top 6 role like Helenius has, but there's a give and a get to that. I mean, with Hemming, it's also, he hasn't earned more minutes, whereas Helenius has forced his way into the top 6 for Ukraine. But yeah, let's get into the puck skills here with Emil Hemming, because I think there's some interesting stuff to talk about, and I think it really starts with the shot, because that's a big standout in this game. For me, the shot is a good 7.5, especially the one-timer and the catch and release wrister off the half wall on the power play. He's one of the most efficient power play scorers in this class. The shot is ridiculous, and it really goes through good mechanics, but also a lot of weight behind his transfer. It's one thing to be mechanically sound like a Cole Caulfield, but to be able to just put as much weight on the puck as he does as well it's really interesting. I have a bit more questions about the decisional aspects, the habitual aspects of a shot, and we'll get into that more in the second segment. But in isolation, the shot mechanics, the power, the accuracy is off the charts, right?
Oh, it is, and he definitely has one of the heaviest releases in this draft class. He really, as you said, puts a ton of power behind every single shot he gets off, and he's also like he can get a really accurate heavy shot off from in tight. He doesn't need too much space to get it off, though. Needing
Yeah,
time is perhaps a bit more of an area that needs some work with him. When he feels crowded, he can rush his shot a little bit,
yeah.
but mechanically, it is certainly a beyond plus level tool and by far the strongest thing in his overall toolkit.
Yeah, for sure. And he reminds me a lot of Casper Halton in ways with the way he
Yeah.
uses his release. And Casper Halton has been having a decent season with London since being transferred over from Liga. Has been producing fairly well, but has been very much the kind of third or fourth wheel on that London forward core behind the likes of Easton Cowan and Denver Barkey and those guys. So two guys that were drafted in the same class as him, but are currently outproducing him, outworking him, and just being more efficient players. That's kind of part of the equation with Hemming, and we'll get into that a bit more in the second segment here. But to really focus on the puck skills for a sec, the playmaking ability is really good in flashes and mediocre at best most of the time, right?
Yeah, he really struggles to make a consistent impact as a passer and a play creator. But the
Yeah.
puck on his stick, he is oftentimes mainly looking for shooting opportunities. He shoots the puck at one of the highest rates in this draft class. He's constantly spamming shot and is really looking to create shooting opportunities for himself first and foremost before he looks off for teammates and passing opportunities. That said, as you mentioned, there have been flashes where he's spotted a passing option and has gotten the puck on the tape through like two sticks to get it there. And there have been these flashes of playmaking like upside, but it has not been something that he's consistently attempted, let alone pulled off this season.
Yeah, I think consistency is going to be the main drawback though that you'll hear about a lot in this episode. But yeah, moving on to the puck skills, I think that the stick handling's pretty good. Like there are moments where he pulls off a move in tight. He gets off the boards fairly well for me as well. Again, not consistently enough in terms of the habits in order to make it work, but he has the tools, the foundation of tools to make it kind of an effective part of his game. And yeah, I've been fairly impressed with his ability to stick handle in motion, to be able to kind of keep control of the puck at top speed, to be able to slow down and handle the puck, corral pucks off passes. There's a decent variety to the things he's able to do well. It just isn't consistent enough. So in isolation, for me, the stick handling's probably a 6.5. I've really liked what I've seen from him in the viewings I've had, but that's brought down to a 4.5 on the moments where it's bad. So there's a big gap between Hemming at his best when he's stick handling and Hemming at his worst when he's stick handling. But the skating is one thing I've had a lot of trouble with. Maybe it's also because it's also an inconsistent part of his game. But what has been your read on Hemming's skating ability so far this season?
Yeah, like mechanically can be a little bit choppy at times. Like there are definitely games, especially when he's like lower on stamina, where he keeps his strides really shallow and it just isn't particularly effective. That
Yeah,
said, when I think a lot of it has to do with conditioning has been my read over the course of the season, but
yeah,
as you mentioned, it's quite inconsistent. But there have been definite games where his output in terms of the skating has been really effective in terms of him getting from A to B quite efficiently and quickly. But it's
mhm,
not the prettiest of strides in the world. He struggles to use to blend his skating ability with his other tools, like especially like the skating and handling combination. It's typically at lower paces where he's able to shine more as a handler, and when he's skating very quickly, he's keeping the handling really like simple to make his life a little bit easier.
yeah,
And blending those two things together has been a bit more of a work in progress this year, but it's definitely a tool that I think has room to grow, and he has quite a powerful lower body. He can be quite explosive through his first two steps. He's
yeah,
again one of the younger players in this draft class. I think the skating is specifically an area that where we'll see a jump in the next year or two in terms of him actually being able to have a more consistent output. But yeah, I think we're talking about inconsistency a lot in this report, and that's definitely been a stalwart in his game over the course of the season, and the skating is no exception.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get into the more decisional aspects and kind of toolkit habits, all that good stuff. More the details of Hemming's game, and I think this is where it's going to be a bit clearer what the issues are. So that's coming up in just a second here, but just before we'll talk you through our sponsors at Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement, thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th, so get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal information. Claim is a Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. So you must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA is available to U.S. customers in good standing, and Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. All right, so moving on to the kind of mental aspects of Emil Hemming's game, we'll also talk about the toolkit, so the way his tools interact. And I think we alluded to that a little bit in our first segment when we talked about the combination of skating and handling. Honestly, I've seen flashes where it's fantastic. I've seen flashes of his skating and handling combo where he's handling pucks at top speed, accessing the offensive zone with quick moves, and making really good plays in motion. I especially like the ability to go from kind of deking to settling the puck in his hip pocket to shooting all in one motion, all while moving fast. But again, it's an aspect of his game that is on and off based on what point of the game he's at. If he's at the end of a 45-second shift, that can still be enough for him to kind of falter, especially if we're talking about the third period. And this is despite him playing between 10 and 12 minutes in Liga. Like there seems to be an issue there, right?
Yeah, like it's certainly been a pretty consistent trend over the course of the season that his best performances have typically come in the first period. In my viewings, this is when he's most energized, he's most implicated on puck. It's where he's trying the most things, and he's like really allowing his creativity to shine a lot more. By the third period, when it
Yeah.
comes around, he's really trying to play more conservative defensive style. And I've mainly watched him at the Liga level this year, and I want
Yeah.
to dig in a little bit more into his U20 tape to see how that correlates at that level. But like one of the big things with his game this season is that he has been asked to play a really defense first role in Liga.
Yeah.
And in that fourth line role, he isn't like a dedicated sniper or power forward. He is a defensive checking forward, especially in terms of like being very active on the forecheck and going out to battle for pucks in corners in the offensive zone. And I've quite liked his defensive impact over the course of the season. That's one thing that has progressed a ton in his game. Coming into the season, the defensive impact was probably one of the weaker portions of his
Yeah.
overall impact. But it's gotten to the point where he's at the very least like net neutral in terms of his defensive play. But yeah, he's definitely learned a lot more habits and has certainly grown a more like tangible fallback game if the goal scoring is not what catches at the NHL level. I can see him settling more in as like a more physical, gritty, checking forward and still being able to make a career out of that.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's decent room for him to become something other than just a goal scorer. I think at the U20 level, it's definitely been a bit of that. Definitely, you're the type of player to deke into the offensive zone and just rip a shot from the top to the top of the circles. I very much want to see a bit more, and I have this year in Liga when he has been playing those fourth line minutes. He's kind of been forced to adopt that area of his game. But what's been really interesting with Hemming is that we're talking about a player who is really good at a couple things, but has shown the ability to kind of expand his toolkit and add more to his game. And I think that's a part of his game that puts him square in the first round on 99% of rankings except for ours. We're the lowest on him at Dobber Prospect at 34th in our rankings. Everyone else has him in the first round, either late first, mid first. Bob McKenzie has him at 15th overall, so he's pretty high on some rankings. He's 5th on NHL Central Scouting's list. So, teams seem to be very high on those areas. But in terms of decision making, I think there are some holes there. There are definitely areas in which, for example, we talk about the shot. The toggle is very much leaning towards shot. He's one of the most trigger happy forwards in this draft, and it's led to him kind of fully omitting pass options that I know he sees. Like, I know he sees those passing lanes, but he trusts his shot a lot. That can be a good thing and a bad thing. But we've seen with Cole Caulfield this year, for example, in Montreal, how important it is as a goal scorer to be able to shoot at the right moments, to shoot in opportune ways. And Caulfield has expanded his game over the years in ways that have made him actually one of the best playmakers on the Habs. And it's because he went from playing, to the right of Jack Hughes, who's just the most creative distributor and playmaker, where all you have to do is just park yourself in a spot and they'll find you, to playing on the line that requires a lot more kind of multifaceted elements. And in a way, even if Caulfield's production has taken a hit, especially in terms of goals, he's become a more effective player. I'd like to see a bit of the same throughout with Emil Hemming, although, like you mentioned, those bottom 6 minutes have helped him create more defensive habits, especially at the pro level, where he's been playing kind of at least, most of the season. I think that's a big part of his game that's progressed, right?
For sure, it's come a long way. Like I think going back to like the on puck habits, one thing I have noticed this season is that he has a tendency of getting very tunnel visioned. When he has a specific route or play in mind, he will just do it, whether or not it ends up making sense in the end. And that ability to, I guess, adapt to situations and change decisions rather than just barreling forward with one decision he does make is an area that I could really see a lot of improvement needed for him moving forward. But that's also something that, especially for one, like he's among the very youngest players playing in Liga this season, and that specifically is a habit that most players with NHL upside end up growing out of in some capacity in the years following their draft eligibility. And I definitely see room to grow with him. I don't think he's ever going to be a true dual threat in the offensive zone in terms of the goal scoring and playmaking toggle, but I do think that he has some more upside as like a power forward. I think he could be used a bit more efficiently in transition in terms of just gaining the zone and going for possession rather than a quick shot from distance and a low danger opportunity. And I also think he has some decent upside in terms of leveraging his physicality and parking himself at the net front and switching roles as well in the offensive zone, rather than just being the default half wall sniper, which he is most of the time in U20, being a bit more adaptable, which he has been had to be at in Liga this season. So I'd like to see him like really implement his physicality in his offensive habits and the things he really tries to do in the offensive zone, because he's really solid. He's a very strong player. When he gets underneath or inside an opponent, he like plants himself and forces his way into soft ice. That way he can create some space for himself, and also as a shooting threat. I think that he has some upside as like a bumper scorer on the power play, perhaps more so than along the half wall. But yeah, he's a very interesting player because the raw tools are really, really solid, and the habits have been so inconsistent. But the question is, how much of that is down to his youth? How much of that is down to the system? Like, TPS is not exactly the Liga team that encourages young players to flourish in terms of their creativity and their offensive implications. I mean, we even saw that with Yuri Slafkovsky in his draft. You're going to end up going first overall. He was like a bit part middle six winger that was mainly tasked with like routine dump and chase type of hockey rather than creative on puck play. So there's definitely a lot of room to grow with Hemming.
Yeah, for sure. But that wraps things up for our second segment. We'll be talking about the projection with Emil Hemming, what we expect him to be at the NHL level, what his upside is, and which team is going to be the best fit for him at the 2024 NHL draft. We'll get into that right after these messages from our sponsors at eBay Motors.
Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophies, also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, LED headlights, exhaust kits, and far more. you're always going to find what you're looking for. Whether you're to speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. They have over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, which is available to US customers only, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply.
Alrighty, so let's close things off here with our breakdown of Emil Hemming's projection, his upside, and which team is going to be the best fit for him. I think in terms of projection, realistically, I could very well see Emil Hemming turn into a middle six player. I think that at the end of the day, we're talking about a goal scoring winger who has some of the best shooting mechanics in the draft, who has a consistent ability to get a shot off in tight. Whether he's playing in the bumper at the NHL level or at the half wall, he's going to be an effective scorer, and he's going to get chances on the power play for sure. I think that's inevitable. I just think my issues are more with the level of consistency. I don't think the concern with me is that he's going to bust. I think the issue with me is that his value is going to be a bit overinflated, kind of like a Victor Olofsson in Buffalo. We're talking about a player who scores a lot and has a fantastic shot and produces a lot on the power play, but outside of those circumstances, isn't at an NHL level in terms of his ability to connect with teammates, to play hockey that kind of builds play incrementally. He's definitely not a chess player. That's what I mean with Emil Hemming, right? Like I think that's going to be the concern. So projection wise, I would say kind of similar to Victor Olofsson, where he's put into a top power play role, and that's basically what he does. Would be great. Although I do think that Hemming has a bit more defensive upside than Olofsson for sure. I think that Hemming is going to be able to at least man his zone well, get a stick in the right lanes. But I don't know. I've seen him around the 15 range on a lot of rankings, and that's a bit high, I think, for both of us, right?
Yeah. Like
Yeah,
we're not like awfully low on him, despite us being the lowest ranking, which kind of surprised me when you mentioned it because like we have him like
yeah,
right up towards the top of the second round, which is the same range where we had Casper Haltonen last year, and that's like among the most direct player comps that I can make among players that have been drafted in the past couple seasons. And it's
yeah,
not just the Finnish connection there. It's just like
yeah,
stylistic as well in terms of also like how they're able to like leverage their physicality in flashes, but are also quite inconsistent and struggle with being tunnel visioned on puck and are perhaps not the most overtly creative players in terms of
mhm,
actually creating plays and creating space for themselves, but are just lethal when they have space and time with the puck on their stick. But I think with Hemming, I see a little bit more upside than a player with like Casper Haltonen in that I think that he's quite an effective forechecker. I think that he is a player that has a decent amount of upside as a puck retriever in the offensive zone. I think it also improves his projectability as a power play tool. He's not just the one trick pony to like get
mhm,
shots off and be the shooting threat. He can also be a player that you send into the corner to retrieve a puck, or like if you're
yeah,
playing like a dump and chase power play entry system, you can send him into the corner and be pretty confident that's like a 60-40 chance of him getting coming out of it with possession. So I
yeah.
think that there's definitely some level of variety in his game that is quite interesting. And depending which team ends up drafting him, I think he could be molded into a fairly interesting second line scorer, but that is very much the upside. And I think it's a lot more likely that he ends up as like a third line goal scorer, can maybe pop up with like 15 to 20 goals a season with second power play minutes, and at even strength is trying to keep himself as a net neutral as a whole. But that said, if
Yeah.
he's able to find a bit more cohesion in how he's able to blend the handling and the vision, because when he's scanning and when he's looking for passing options, he's not a bad passer by any means. It's just there's been a real lack of consistency in exploiting passing lanes for him. But if he's able to be a bit more deceptive on puck and add some more dual threat elements into his offensive game, at that point, I'd be a lot more optimistic with the potential for second line upside with him.
For sure. In terms of kind of the realistic projection, I think I still see kind of, that middle six option. I
Yeah.
think that I don't think second line is the upside. I think complementary second line player is more or less realistic for me in terms of what I see in Emil Hemming. I still see the goal scoring ability as a bona fide plus, and especially if he's paired with a two-way center who can consistently create advantages in transition for him. I think the fact that he's good on dump ins is pretty much by default right now, rather than it being a bona fide strength in and of itself. Because yes, he is a good puck protector. Yes, he has a big body. He's able to kind of shield pucks fairly well. But I think Emil Hemming as a transition facilitator or as a transition finisher is maybe more effective than as a dump and chase cycle offense creator. When he's at his best, the tape that I've seen of him, for example, at the whether it's the U18, the Linka Gretzky, the U18 Worlds, the World Juniors. I've seen some situations in which he's paired with a really good center, and it does wonders for his game. But yeah, I think that overall, worst case scenario, you're getting a fourth liner. I don't think we're getting necessarily a player. You're getting necessarily a player who won't make the NHL. It's just a matter of how effective he's going to be, right? So that's kind of the thing with me. But in terms of NHL fits, especially if we focus on Bob McKenzie's rankings, he has him 15th right now, and Bob is really connected with what's going on around the NHL and what teams think about these players. So let's look at kind of the 13 to 22 range. Which teams do you think are the most likely to take a swing at him? I mean, I'm looking at St. Louis right now, and he's a St. Louis player, isn't he?
He's definitely a St. Louis type of guy. I think if Liam
Yeah.
Greentree is still on the board, the Blues are going to have a really tough
Oh
time
yeah.
passing on him. But I think St. Louis could certainly make sense. I think the Montreal Canadiens would also make sense in terms of adding a player with some really intriguing raw tools, a really, really wicked, like high-end tool as well with the shot and the goal scoring. And on top of that, he's young for the class. They're familiar with TPS as a program, having drafted Yuri
Mhm.
Slafkovsky out of the same program. And they've been looking to add more goals and a bit more like size to their wings. So I think Emil Hemming would make sense as a Montreal Canadian. But who else? Because like I think it's possible that he also drops as far as like 25. So like you're getting well into the range of like contending teams that may lose in the first two rounds that will be options for him.
For sure. I think for me, it's just Washington, LA are two like very good
Yeah.
options, and they're currently at 18th and 19th in the tank standing. So this does seem to be about the range that I could expect having to go. For me, I just think that with Washington, they're going to be looking to replace Ovi's goal scoring touch in the next couple of years, the picks that they add. So I think Hemming could very well become an interesting selection for them here at kind of the 18 range, because he fits that mold of a player you can stick on the half wall and he will rip shot after shot after shot, and one of them's eventually going to go in. Obviously, he's not Ovi in terms of the overall quality of shot because no one is. Ovi's the best goal scorer of all time, and I stand by that. He did what he did in the trap era, and that is ridiculous. Yeah, I think that. I think that Emil Hemming could be a very Washington Capitals pick. LA also likes these kind of big boys. They've been playing a very dump and chase system recently. And if they look at Emil Hemming's dump and chase game and see it as something they want to expand on rather than limit, Hemming is among the best in this kind of range in terms of retrieving pucks in the offensive zone. So he could be a great fit as well. But I wouldn't be surprised if Chicago takes him with Tampa Bay's pick. I think that could be another option there. Chicago, I mean, they do have a lot of forwards, but they're looking for guys who can fill out the blanks where they have, they have Frank Nazar, they have Oliver Moore, they have Connor Bedard down the middle. They might want to plug a goal scoring winger next to them, and I don't think you can get a better option than Emil Hemming in this range if you're looking to contend in the next 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I mean, Oliver Moore and Frank Nazar would both be excellent fits stylistically with Emil Hemming, being able to not only carry some of the transition burden, but also have a plus level defensive impact and just
Yeah.
constantly get him the puck. Like they're both such capable playmakers in the offensive zone and so pacey. So I
Yeah.
think that Chicago would, in terms of what they already have in the cupboards, would be an excellent fit.
Absolutely. But that wraps things up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you think of the episode and who you want to cover next in our prospect spotlights. If you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to leave us a rate and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And make sure to tune in for our next shows as we continue our prospects coverage for the month of April. This has been Hadi Kalakash, Director of North American Scouting, with Sebastian High, Director of European Scouting and Head Scout for Dauber Prospects, and hope you see you next time.